Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just want to check, can people hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up or... Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for that. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for joining us today for our special edition of the Diverse Voices panel. My name's Georgina and I work in the careers team here at Edge Hill University. We've been hosting these Diverse Voices panels for a little while now, and this provides an opportunity for our alumni to share their stories, to inspire you all that have come into these events or watching them back, and also to build awareness around the barriers that some students face and overcome during their unique journeys. And it just gives everyone a bit of an insight of some of the unique journeys that our students and graduates do go through. Today's panel, special one for a reason, because we have got Hannah from the Widening Access and Participation team here at Edge Hill hosting this event. And Hannah and the team have been planning a series of events that are happening this week. They are designed to raise awareness and show support for care leavers, care experience and estranged students. And the touring photographic exhibition from the Unite Foundation titled This Is Home is the heart of this week's events. Which is why we've called it the Diverse Voices This Is Home edition. So before I do hand over to Hannah for the panel today, I'm just going to quickly run over the housekeeping side of things. The event is being recorded, so I'll just ask now that if you're not comfortable with your name and perhaps a thumbnail appearing potentially on this recording, please do leave the meeting now. You will still be able to watch it back because we're going to upload it to our YouTube channel and we'll be sending out a link to all of our attendees today, so you will be able to watch that back. Just please also ensure that you keep your cameras and microphones off during this event. And if you do have any, unless you're a panelist or a host, and if you do have any questions or comments, the chat feature is on, and do pop them in and we'll look at them throughout the event as well. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Hannah, and Hannah's going to start today's event off for us.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Georgina. Again, could I just have maybe a thumbs up or something, just so I know you can hear me okay? Oh, great. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everyone. Fantastic. Thanks, Georgina. So as she said, my name is Hannah Watts. I work in the Widening Access and Participation team, specifically as a Widening Access officer. So I do a lot of work with care experience and estranged students. So that's just why it's me hosting today. It's really, really lovely to be here. This panel, though, really isn't about me at all. So I'm going to let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. So maybe if we start with you, Charlie, if you're happy to say what course you studied and what you're up to now, and then we'll move on to Lauren.
Yeah, hi, I'm Charlie. I studied both my BA and my MA in English at Edge Hill, and I went on to do an MSc in Human Anatomy at the University of Edinburgh. So I am a social historian and anatomist, and I run my own business teaching English literature as well. So.
Amazing, such cool jobs. Thank you, Charlie. And Lauren, if you want to let us know what you've studied at Edge Hill and what you're up to now.
Hi, yeah, I'm Lauren. I studied my undergrad doing bachelor's in psychology, and now I'm doing a postgrad at Edge Hill in counselling and psychotherapy, creative approaches. I'm working part-time / full-time at a care home in Kirk, and I do a bit of volunteering with the Widening Access panel in the uni, student governor role, and TASO panel, which is part of the Office for Students, organised by. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you both so much, and thank you as well for giving up your time today. I'm sure we all really appreciate it. So as Georgina has already said, this panel is specifically about care experience and estrangement, how and if that impacted your experience at university, and in particular what sort of happened post-graduation, careers, all that sort of thing. So just before we get into some questions, and I've made sure as well to embed some questions that I know people have submitted on the form as well, I can confirm I have checked with Charlie and Lauren that they're happy to talk about this. So Charlie, if you feel comfortable to still, would you mind just giving us a very sort of brief overview of what your sort of experience with care and estrangement is, just for the context of today's panel?
Yeah, so I had quite a comfortable, nice sort of childhood, and my dad unfortunately died of cancer when I was 18. When I was 19, my sister was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and my mum at that point for whatever reason, I don't think she could quite cope with the situation, and that was the last time that I saw her. Basically in 2009, she sort of said that she couldn't deal with it, and that was that. So that was a month after I started at Edge Hill, and my grandmother, also on my mother's side, had dementia as well. So from that point, I just started my undergraduate. My mother had completely left. I had a sister with cancer to look after and a grandmother with Alzheimer's too. So yeah, kind of went through my whole university career from the off. So that was my experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Charlie. I really appreciate it. And Lauren as well, if you're still happy to, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so for me, growing up, my childhood wasn't great. It was quite chaotic, very dysfunctional household. When I came to college, beforehand, I hadn't planned to come to university. It was completely on a whim. I think I applied on one random night. I think I'll go to college, why not? And it was my college tutors that really pushed me. It was like, you should go to university. Without them, obviously I should attribute some of my success in education to my own abilities, but a huge part of it was the people around me. I was estranged from both parents around the age of, I think it was 18 or 19. When I started college, or just after I started college, I was there for 2 years doing my level 3 health and social care. And then when I left college and came to university, I'd been living in a foyer, so I moved onto campus, and this was like my permanent residence. And yeah, I've since been in contact with my younger sister, occasionally with my mum to see my younger sister, but no contact with my dad, and I don't really have any other family members. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Lauren. And just to clarify, for anyone that's maybe come in with different levels of experience, would you mind just letting us know what you mean by foyer accommodation?
Yeah, absolutely. So a foyer is basically, it's similar to a care home in that it supports homeless people or people who cannot live at home anymore, usually young people between the ages of around 16 to 25. You won't often see any variance in that. And it's similar to a care home, that there is certain rules and regulations. They're there to support you. You'll have a key worker there. I think it's similar to like a halfway house that you'd see in like the care system. Except that there's some young people who might have gone there through a social worker and they've been taken out of their home and put into the foyer. But most cases, including myself, is where you go to the council, you explain your situation, and they would recommend this foyer to you. There's not a huge amount of them. There probably should be more because I think they're great. But yeah, I think it's a growing industry. Yeah.
Yeah, fab. Thanks for just clarifying that, Lauren. That's perfect. Okay, so we're going to get into the questions, and obviously feel free to chip in as and when. We can take the conversation in any route that you want to. These questions really are just here to sort of guide us, and some suggestions as well from the people watching today. So maybe, Lauren, if we start with you this time. My first question is just, why did you choose to go to university, and why Edge Hill?
So yeah, I touched on on this a little bit, didn't I? So initially I did a health and social care BTEC at college. That was because I knew I wanted to help people. I thought maybe I'll do youth work, or, work. I knew I wanted to work with young people at the time and supporting people. I had no idea in what route. I had no idea about the different routes I could take or career paths. I only knew of what the people I'd seen in my life. I'd done like no previous research on it. It was only when I came to college I thought I really enjoy learning, and I think I've been missing that in my life for the years between high school, leaving high school, and joining college, which was about 3 years after high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't think about going back into education. I didn't really think of myself as doing anything or amounting to anything in life. And then when I randomly joined, and then I started to enjoy it more, and then my college tutors would step in and say, you're really doing well at this. If you want to go into this kind of role, then maybe you should go to university. And they really pushed me forward. And honestly, if I could just like show you like some of the things that they were saying, they've emailed me and telling me like, Lauren, you need to go for this. It's a really big opportunity. And yeah, so I came to Edge Hill because it was Warrington Vale Rural College. It was Warrington Collegiate at the time. They had a tour, or a campus tour, and lectures for us in college. We came and visited for the day. And we had a look round. We had to speak to some of the tutors here, some of the academic staff, some of the support staff. And I just really like the campus. I really like the vibes. I like the accommodation. The course online was fine, like its ranking, everything was really like ticking the box. It was all fine. I was like, this is a really good university. I did go to visit Manmet, Manchester Metropolitan. I couldn't find the hall where they had the talk, and I thought, well, this is never going to work. I can't come here. And I just knew that being in a city was going to be a bit overwhelming for me. Other unis I applied for, I think, was Chester, which was in the Chester campus. And I never visited there, but I didn't really think much of it. And yeah, I think I was really dead set. My other tutors, I applied for Bath Spa and I didn't get accepted. And my tutor was like, go far, you know, really travel, get yourself out there. I was like, no, because I'm from Warrington. I was like, I'm going to go down the road. I'm going to travel, but not too far. And that on top of the campus and the facilities, I think so. I hate to say it, it feels really, I can't think of the words onto my tongue, but I didn't want to judge it based on just the looks and the feeling. You know, it's also about the course content and, like, you know, what have other students said is their experience. But because this was going to be my home, I wanted to feel comfortable in the environment I was in, and I don't think I was going to get that in Manchester city centre. So yeah,
thank you for that, Lauren. So it sounds like there was a couple of factors there. It sounds like you had amazing teachers and people supporting you at college, so that's so brilliant. I'm so glad to hear that. And it sounds like location played quite a big part for you as well, and distance from where you were from, so that's really interesting. And Charlie, how about yourself?
Yeah, so it was never in my life plan to ever go to university, ever. It was obviously I was a sort of grade A student through my GCSEs, and then my dad's illness coincided with my A levels, and I just plummeted. I think I wrote song lyrics in one of my answer sheets, one of my A levels. I didn't care, didn't want to do it, just plummeted completely. And my college tutors weren't particularly supportive, and they weren't very understanding, or they didn't sort of try and talk to me or accommodate anything. So I completely sort of dropped out of education at that point. And that was down in Kettering, down in the East Midlands. So my ex-boyfriend actually went to Edge Hill, and when everything sort of kicked off with my family, I moved up to live with him in Skelmersdale. And I was sort of, you know, thinking what my life choices could be and where do I want to go next. And sort of a year or two sort of working down the line, I thought maybe I should redo my A levels and like try again. And he suggested calling Edge Hill and seeing if they had any like night courses or anything. So I phoned the office and they're like, why don't you do the fast forward program, which I don't think you offer anymore. I'm not sure. Anyway, it was fantastic. So it was the access course for people, for mature students. So I went along to the open night for that, and it was fantastic. Like people with similar experiences to me, older people, sort of students who hadn't been sort of in love with traditional education, and we just had a great laugh for an evening. And the sessions were once a week. They're really, really fun. I met one of my course tutors as well, so that carried on that relationship into the BA as well. So yeah, it was sort of the way that Edge Hill sort of wanted to accommodate and wanted to support right from the off. That was what sort of drew me to it. And then geographically it made perfect sense. Now I knew people that went there, so yeah, that was sort of why I picked Edge Hill. But if it hadn't been for that access course, I was sort of adrift. I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad to hear as well you've had such a positive experience at Edge Hill. And yeah, we still run sort of fast track programs and that sort of thing, if that was sort of the thing you're referencing.
When I started, there was fast track and fast forward, and I think the fast forward one was ended, but the fast track one continued.
Oh,
so yeah.
Great. And interesting that both of you as well had that locational element, sort of that familiarity coming into play as well across both of your experiences. Excellent. Okay, my next question, maybe we go back to you, Lauren, just to get us started, is when you came to university, did you talk to sort of your peers and lecturers about the experiences that you'd had, sort of letting them know that you were estranged? What did that look like if you did?
For personal tutors, no. None of the academic staff, at the time when I first came, it didn't feel relevant. And even now with my tutors, I don't know if it's different anyway, because I'm a bit more self-reliant, and I don't think I require as much support. With my academic side, now I'm doing the masters, I again haven't told them. And it's a shame, because I think I've spoken about this in the panels. I've wanted to break down this, like, the tutors don't really need to know, because I feel like it'd be very, very helpful if they did. And I think if a few of them did, in my undergrad, they could have maybe helped me when I was struggling more, because although a lot of my mental health struggles in first and second year, mainly first year, weren't directly to do with my estrangement. It was like a side effect or a symptom of, so the loneliness and feeling more depressed, feeling more anxious, and I'd look forward to lessons genuinely, but then some days I'd go and I'd just feel really down. And I'd stop engaging, and I'd be struggling behind my coursework, and maybe they didn't really understand why, or I guess it's a big cohort as well, so you kind of fall through the cracks. Yeah, I don't know what stopped me. I don't think it was a fear of stigma. I think it was just irrelevance and not wanting to be a burden, not wanting to be like, I wouldn't want anyone else to feel like this ever, but it felt a bit like, oh, I don't want to be like, oh, poor me, like, you know, all the attention, like trying to grab, it felt attention seeking almost for me to even bring it up to academic staff, unfortunately, which it shouldn't. To my friends and peers, I hadn't planned to. I'd spoken to a couple of friends who I'd made, I got a bit close to, just out of like general. I think my flatmates in the first accommodation I lived in, so I moved out of there for a couple of months just for personal choice. I wanted to live with someone I knew better on campus. They knew, but it was because my college tutor had brought me to university to move in because I didn't have anyone else to bring me and my stuff. And so when they're asking questions, like, oh, this is my college tutor. I should have been, this is my friend, but then I didn't want to make it any more like overstepping boundaries than we already were. I was like, yeah, this is my college tutor. Like, oh, cool. And I think someone mentioned like, oh, why is this? Like, oh yeah, I don't live with my parents. I'm estranged, you know, I don't do this. And I don't feel like I was judging that, but I felt a bit uncomfortable telling them. I felt like I didn't really want to. But there we are. Other friends that I made, I wasn't uncomfortable to tell them. I wasn't openly telling them. I think I did at one point actually, but I think it was on a night out. You know, you're all drinking and hanging out, and they were like, "Oh, you said this." I was like, "Oh, I did, didn't I? Yeah, interesting." But yeah, I think it was more of a stigma around telling academic staff. The support staff, like through email and like the wellbeing team, they obviously already knew anyway from application, and I'd speak to them about anything. But I'm a little bit of I'm quite outspoken anyway, so I think it's quite hard for me to hold my water, let alone. I don't think I'd struggle so much to tell anyone, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think you sort of touched on a couple of really interesting points there about like moving in, and Charlie, we can talk about your experience as well. Feel free to chip in, but that idea, like your college tutor moved you in, and kind of people asking, "Oh, is that your mum?" and kind of making those assumptions, and actually sort of the power of watching our own language when we're talking to people, not assuming that they have parents, or if they do, that relationship is one that they want to be a part of. And interesting as well, you sort of touched on there were some people you felt more comfortable to tell, maybe the student support team, and others you felt less so. That's really interesting. Charlie, how about you? How was your sort of experience in sort of letting people at the university know? Did you want to talk about it? What did that look like for you?
So I'm quite similar to Lauren in that I think I'm very independent, and it feels a little bit like I still don't really like telling people what's happened because it feels a bit like I'm attention seeking. I want people to feel sorry for me, and that's absolutely not the case. It's just something that has happened. So the academic staff while I was at Edge Hill were fantastic, like my actual course tutors, and there were a few of those I got quite close to. They'd notice if I was having an off day, and like I would talk to them. They were brilliant. My personal tutor, not so much. I'm sure she was lovely, but I think I met her once a semester and she never seemed to know who I was when I walked in the room. And that's not her fault. You know, you've got a myriad students in front of you. You can't remember everybody, but I never felt I sort of developed that relationship enough to be able to talk to sort of a personal tutor. Support staff, similarly, I felt like everything was kind of pushed towards counselling, and it's just personal preference for me. Talking about it makes it worse. So to keep suggesting sort of counselling stuff was just not really very helpful for me. So that was fine. But the course, like tutors themselves, were brilliant. And then similarly with friends as well, because I'd been on that access course, I'd made friends with some of the older students. And I mean, a couple of them, one of them still says I'm like a second daughter to her. Like she's like, we make really, really close bonds with my friends. So the older ones, absolutely, like we would discuss things and they would be very supportive. The younger students, often I'd hear a lot was sort of, well, you know, you've only got one mum. And you think, well, you haven't had the life experience. Maybe I don't want to share this. So it's sort of a 50-50 split with friends. And then, as I say, the course tutors themselves were fantastic. And I'm still in touch with a few of them as well, just really supportive. So.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear that you sort of made those lifelong friends. And again, sort of hearing both of your experiences there, interesting that both of you using that sort of language of you don't want to feel like a burden, pity, that kind of thing. And obviously, like you've said it yourselves, that's not the case. You are not a burden, but that doesn't change the way that you feel, I suppose. I think it was you, Lauren, that was saying to me the other day, like it's less about sympathy, more about empathy was kind of what you wanted. And that quote you said has just stuck with me ever since. So I've chucked it in again now. And Charlie, just before I move on to my next question, just following on from something you said, I just wanted to pick up, which might be slightly more relevant for you because you've sort of gone beyond Edge Hill, is when you sort of moved into your work and your career, how did you find sort of speaking to employers about your experiences? Did you speak to your employers about it?
Yeah, so I am I allowed to, right to say where I worked, or like what? I don't know.
It's up to you how much you want to disclose.
Yeah,
you can keep it as
so-
vague as you like.
So I worked for the NHS for a long time, which is kind of how my academic career has kind of evolved as well. I've got certain interests, but I think when you're quite young, I think a lot of people don't really understand. When you say, oh, I'm estranged from a parent, I thought, oh, you know, it's an argument, or you're sort of acting out as a teenager. That really wasn't the case. So I remember I started a job at a hospital, and they hadn't backdated my pay. So I'd worked for a month and a half with no pay, and my manager had told me they couldn't pay me until the next payday. And I'd sort of gone to them and said, I can't survive 2 months with no money. Like, what do I do? And she turned around and said, oh, you need the bank of mum and dad. And I thought, well, I appreciate I'm young and you think that's appropriate, but it's really not. So yeah, there was quite a I think an assumption that it's a silly argument, and also an assumption that you have those things to fall back on. I've come up with that quite a lot through my career, and maybe not so much now, but certainly when I was younger. So I don't know if Lauren's experience was maybe the same as that, but
I did want to jump in there, piggybacking on what you said there. The description of estrangement, it can be like an argument with a parent. Same with my friends, and it has been similar with some employers, or when I've been at work, but just people in general. I think I've met, they assume estrangement is like, oh, you could go back. Well, they're still here. You could still go and speak. You know, you say, oh, it's a family, the relationship breakdown. Like, we know that happens. You always go back to them when you get older, and it's like you'd really, and especially friends would be like, oh, I'm like that. You know, I want to move out. My parents are like that. I'm like, you don't. It's not quite. It's like, I think it's similar to the whole like people now with like mental illness online. You can have lots of the symptoms, and they can present themselves at some point in your life. Like, this can happen in your relationships with your parents, but it's different to having estrangement and being fully estranged. It's a completely different experience. So yeah, I really empathise with that point.
Yeah, like you say, it's not just a case, oh, we've had a falling out. Like, you know, the definition that's sort of in part of being estranged is that's irreconcilable. You know, it's at a point where you're not coming back from that. So yeah, people making those flippant comments, I'm really sorry to hear that you guys have experienced that, but thank you for sharing again. I'm going to go rogue from the question sheet just because of the things you're saying are so interesting. I just want to pick up, so let's see where we go. Charlie, I think you sort of were talking about you know, that gap where your employer was saying, oh, you know, you can just rely on the bank of mum and dad until your pay packet comes in. What was your experience, if you don't mind me asking, sort of immediately after you've graduated, in terms of like finance, living situation? Because like you say, there isn't that bank of mum and dad that some others might be able to rely on.
So the hardest actually at the start of my degree financially. So as I said, I just started my undergraduate. I had my sister to look after, who was living in Birmingham at that time as well. So all of her chemotherapy, all her treatment was down in Birmingham. And my grandmother was actually based in Leicester. So me and my sister were kind of bandying her between us. So it was ridiculously stressful, especially financially, to cope with that as well. And because I was claiming student loans, I wasn't entitled to any kind of carers allowance. I couldn't have a job because I had my grandmother or my sister at the weekends and evenings and stuff. So that was an issue. And I was fortunate enough to have my ex-boyfriend who I lived with, and he took on extra hours at his job and managed to sort of support everything. But I remember going to student services and asking for one of the emergency loans, and they sort of looked at all our finances and said, well, your sister has a house, so while she's having chemotherapy, you could rent that out. And I thought, I'm 19 years old, I don't know how to organise doing that. So that was probably the hardest sort of period that we managed to kind of get through sheer grit and determination. And then after that, I'd managed a little bit further down the line to pick up some part-time hours with the NHS, and then that evolved into full-time. So yeah, after graduation, I was sort of relatively financially okay, and it was fine, but it was that initial kind of hit at the beginning that was incredibly difficult to coast through.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Charlie. And how about yourself, Lauren? What was your experience like, you know, immediately post-graduation? What did that situation look like for you?
Well, first of all, it's terrifying because if you've not got a solid plan in place. I feel like similar to Charlie, there was places I could go. I could live with like maybe friends. My issue was that they were friends, but some of the options, and there was one person particularly who was like, you can definitely live with me, that's fine. But he's struggling himself with like mental illness, alcohol, dependent, drug addiction. And his household is just not a very healthy place to be living. And I hate to say that. Obviously, he's doing a bit better now, which is great. But at the time, I was like, I really don't want to end up getting myself in a situation where I'm not going anywhere and I'm going like backwards a step almost. I want to feel like I'm moving forward. I'd looked into doing a master's. It was kind of like a bit of a dream to do a master's. Like when I first came to uni and I started studying, I was like, oh, maybe I could do a master's, like, and further, because I knew that psychology was vague, and it was like bringing in all the different things I wanted to do into one. And I was like, I could go on further study. Obviously, luckily I did, and it was Edge Hill. But I knew it was going to be at Edge Hill. I'd looked at other universities, kind of thinking like living the dream, like, oh, I wonder if another university would be, you know, but I look at the courses anyway, and there was some that I really, really like the look of, but I couldn't travel down there. I don't have a car. Finance, I'd be paying the full price and you have to pay tuition fees. I just couldn't afford that. I'd have to find a job up there. Then it's locating and moving and applying for the jobs. If I have an interview, how am I going to travel? And then in the meantime, in the summer, where am I going to live? Because I have to move out of this accommodation. So I thought it's just easiest if I stay in the accommodation I'm in and stay at Edge Hill for the cheaper tuition, really. It did feel a little bit like limited options, which I'm absolutely grateful for. Like, I mean, the fact that I'm even on a master's, I never would have dreamed a few years ago to be doing this. But yeah, I guess it's an important thing to mention. Your options are very much limited when you've got limited resource. And like to quote before, the bank of mum and dad, I have no backup plan. I have no backup money coming in. If I don't get it myself, I don't know how I'm going to get it. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And Charlie, because I think you went on to sort of do further study and that kind of thing as well. What was your experience compared to Lauren's, perhaps?
I don't know if this is completely on point or not, but Lauren's just sort of nudged a memory in my head. When I was doing my MSc in human anatomy, the course fees, you can only claim so much for a master's course up here. So what I could claim was probably about a third of just the course fees. And then it was a full-time intensive course for a year. So I had to work out sort of living costs and food and everything on top of that as well. And it cost me in excess of probably about 20 grand to do this course. And if you pass a certain amount of it, you get the diploma. And then if you pass the rest of it, you get the degree after that. And there was an exam that I was really, really worried about taking. And I had a bit of a panic attack about it, basically. And I went in to see one of my tutors at Edinburgh and sort of said, I don't know what to do. I'm going to fail. It's cost me all this money. And all he could say was, well, but the diploma's still good. And I thought, you don't understand how much it's taken for me to get here, to do this, to pay this amount of money. I don't want the diploma. I want the degree. I did get the degree. It was fine. But there was no kind of sort of understanding of, well, you know, it's just normal amounts of money. It's really not, especially when you haven't got anything to fall back on and you've channeled all of your savings and all of your energy into doing something you want to do well at it. So I don't think that was particularly well understood. I think most of the other students on my course got quite comfortable family backgrounds. A lot of them are foreign students that have come over, and sort of other family members are paying for their courses and stuff as well. So I felt very much out of place when I was doing that. Edge Hill, absolutely, when I did the masters there, the lower course fees were a massive draw for that. I never looked at any other university anyway, because I knew I wanted to go to Edge Hill. It was just a nice little bonus that they discounted the fees for me. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want university to end. So that's how I ended up doing the MA there. So.
Oh, that's lovely to hear that you had sort of such a positive experience at Edge Hill. And I know as well, we're really fortunate at Edge Hill that like the lovely careers team offers support sort of post-graduation. So for anyone sort of watching this who didn't realise, our careers team offers, I think, support sort of years after graduation as well. So I'm really glad that you both sort of felt that you wanted to stay on and that sort of thing. So that's really positive to hear. And I guess going back to you, Charlie, when you were looking at courses and moving into your career, thinking about different employers and that sort of thing, how did you start researching that? Like really practically, how did you start thinking and planning for your career? Did you sort of plan for your career?
I have never really had a clear idea of what I wanted to do ever. I tend to follow what I find interesting. I find English literature very interesting. That's what I followed. Then within that, I found sort of the social history aspect. I think there was a course or a module on the MA run at the time about digital humanities and sort of researching newspaper archives and all that kind of stuff. So I got involved in that. And focused a lot of energy onto researching sort of historical cadaver and all that kind of stuff. Alongside that, I was working for the NHS, so I was dealing with very vulnerable people and looking at sort of communication skills and sort of becoming good at that job. And then when I moved up to Scotland, I thought, well, why don't I combine everything together? You know, I've got this interest in medical history, I've got this interest in communication skills and literature and all that kind of stuff. I combined it all. So I qualified in anatomy, and I've written a book that comes out with Routledge. It's about sort of health communication and how to develop skills of empathy when you're talking to someone who has a different background to that of yourself. So that's supposed to come out in October. It's with the sort of pre-publication team at the minute. But yeah, so I've never really had a clear idea, but I think all my experiences have kind of channeled together, and it's kind of all sort of worked in one direction. It's not necessarily a direction I could have predicted, but it's that direction. So.
Yeah, but that's great to hear, you know, that really realistic interpretation. It wasn't that necessarily you had it mapped out. It was more kind of you knew what you liked, you knew sort of what those transferable skills were, and that sort of led you to explore careers maybe you didn't even know existed, like growing up, that kind of thing. You know, that's great, that's real. So that's what it's all about today, really. And how about yourself, Lauren? Was it kind of like a conscious long-term choice? How did you sort of go about planning your career, if you did?
So there was no set plan when I did health and social care at college. I knew I wanted to help people. When I came to psychology, I didn't know which career I wanted to go into. I knew I wanted to work in the realm of like social work or social care, or maybe like being a clinical psychologist and working with like mental health nursing, maybe going into that at a later time in life. I knew it was around the mental health and social working area. And then I came into my bachelor's, and then as I came towards the end, I thought, okay, I think I want to go into like a counselling or maybe psychotherapy role, or maybe like applying psychology to the real world and helping people with their, like, you know, life outcomes and supporting them. And it seems like every step I've gone, I've never had a clear idea. Similar to how Charlie said, you've always been going in one direction, but it's never been like, you've never been able to predict like which direction you're coming from. And again, like with my master's, I'm thinking towards the end, I'm like, I've got a general idea, but I'm not sure exactly where it's going to take me. But all I know is that I'm going to do what I can to get there. I think I'm looking towards now, looking at a graduate scheme. So the NHS training graduate scheme, which is obviously very, very competitive. So that's one of a few that I've been looking at. I had a careers meeting the other day. I don't know if she's in this call actually or not. She might be, if you are. Hi. I saw and I discussed, like, you know, different outcomes with her, and I'm very much on the ball with that. I will utilize careers quite a lot. I tend to reach out. So that's the only real perspective I can give, because even if I've not seen anything online to lead me to them, I think I've asked them about anything. I'm sure I've asked them before about stuff and they've been like, we don't actually do that. I'm fully taking advantage. So my master's application they help with, looking at voluntary options, placement options, work, and obviously now graduate work. I think, again, I attribute a bit of that to my educational and working successes, that I might not know the answers, but I always know how to find them. And I know that careers have got quite a few of them. So yeah, I think it's been good for me. I think Edgehill's been really supportive in that aspect. The whole supporting me outside of the course and like where I want to go in my life has been absolutely great. Yeah, my biggest struggles mainly came on the actual course and the learning, or maybe my personal life. But yeah, I've never personally struggled with that. I mean, I'm doing masters, so we'll see what happens when I leave, how I actually manage. But yeah, up until now, it's been fairly positive.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. You sort of utilised all the support that's available from the careers team. As I say, we're really lucky to have them. So great that you're speaking to them even this week. There we go. That is testament in itself that you're still chatting to them. They supported you with your masters. So that's really fantastic to hear. And I made a little note to myself, just going back, that I forgot to ask. So I'll ask now. Charlie, you mentioned a book. Do you want to give it a cheeky plug? What's the name of it? Can we buy it?
Yeah, you can. So it's called, what's it called? I forgot what it's called.
On the spot there.
You have put me on the spot. The Art of Medical Communication, Bringing the Humanities into Clinical Practice.
Amazing.
By Charlie Guy. So it's like I say, we're pre-production now, so it should be out around October time. It's with Taylor and Francis, which is a branch of Routledge. So yeah, it's essentially how you can, as a practitioner or anybody really, look at film, look at literature, music, and just develop your sense of empathy. And really, I sort of noticed this most while I was doing my medical degree, but a lot of doctors now are so highly qualified scientifically, and they are so skilled as technicians and as practitioners, but they can't talk to people because they don't have any experience outside of that kind of scientific sort of zone. So yeah, it's just about how to look at other people's backgrounds and other people's stories, and you know, they've got a different life experience to you. Maybe you need to communicate in a slightly different way. So yeah, that is my book.
That's amazing. And it sounds really relevant to what we were talking about earlier, that idea of like less sympathy, more empathy, all that kind of thing. So relevant. Amazing. I saw Lauren's face like, oh, when you were saying what that was. Just going to write that down for later. Fantastic. Available at all good bookstores. There you go. Awesome. Okie dokie. So I'm just going to pick up on one of the ideas that we sort of mentioned a while back that I made little notes to come back to. And I think, Lauren, you sort of touched on that idea of sort of experiencing loneliness, understandably, at university. I guess, what sort of factors do you think should be in place to kind of help care experienced students and estranged students sort of deal with that, or any sort of issues that they face at university? What things need to be in place to give you kind of the best possible chance to succeed?
Wow, big question.
Yes, I can repeat if you would like.
Yeah. Title. Yeah. So in terms of loneliness and maybe the depression, the most problematic symptoms was isolation, not attending lectures, not attending. I was part of a rugby society, and I would withdraw from that also. And also, not even on like the welcome week, I was just so. When I first came, I was really excited. I'm quite extroverted. I love meeting new people. I was ready to move in. And I think just the shock of being around so many people and like seeing them all with their families on the move-in day, and the parents were all there, and realizing that how different I am, major imposter syndrome plays in. I think, and I wasn't even that much older. I think I was like 21 maybe. I don't even know my own age. Yeah, and they were all like 18. They just like left. They came straight from like high school to college. Imposter syndrome was huge, and those kind of things led me to withdraw. So your social circle is a huge part of that. I mean, I feel like I'm quite adaptable, so I didn't enjoy the halls I was living in and how they made me feel, not necessarily by any fault of their own. They were not malicious in any way, but I just didn't enjoy my time there. I started like judging myself and not wanting to go to lectures and feeling really lonely. So I moved to a different flat, with someone who I met on the rugby team who was also on my course, and like she was kind of like my right-hand woman throughout most of my undergrad. Was on the same course as well, which was great. So it was quite lucky for me to have a friend like that to support me and move in with. I think aside from that, kind of thinking of stuff that you can control and that the university can do, it's reaching out, the emails. I do agree with Charlie, there was a bit of a push to go towards counselling and having that kind of mental health support. I personally, I don't ever find it beneficial or not, but I think it was nice to know that there was support there, and even knowing that I had counselling, the idea of it is like, I'm going to get better, this is going to get easier, I'm going to counselling. But that's just for me personally. The reaching out, there was a case of, I think it was a wellbeing team, if I wouldn't come out of my room for several days, which sometimes I wouldn't, they would come and knock on, someone would report, oh, I don't think Lauren's okay. I don't know how helpful I found that. If anything, it felt almost embarrassing. Like, oh my God, have they just seen them knock on my door? They think I'm having a breakdown or something. I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but yeah, that probably wasn't very helpful. An email would have been nice or suffice. Maybe I was ignoring the emails, that might be why. I don't know, sometimes I go into university on my course, and there was a couple of academic tutors who were just really engaging, really wanted to know your take on things. If they saw, one in particular, he saw that I was down and would come and ask me, he'd sit next to me like, oh, so what do you think about this? And he wouldn't necessarily ask me, how are you? You don't look happy, or you look unhappy, or you weren't here for the past couple of weeks, what's going on? But he'd ask me questions about the work and ask me, so how are you getting on with the coursework? And it felt almost like an indirect way of being like, are you okay? And very just generally warm towards me as well. And I think that warmth from other people was just really supportive. I feel like when they came, like, so when the support team would come and knock on and like, oh, are you okay? You know, friends have reported that you've not come out your room for a few days. It felt more concern and like, are you all right? Like the sympathy, like, are you okay? What's going on? Oh, I don't want that. But just the general warmth, like from my academic tutors, was, it's because when you're isolating, which you will do because you have that shame, that embarrassment, that fear of being different, fear of being judged for stuff that you can't control, it makes you not want to go near anyone. And then just having someone approach you in a normal, quote unquote normal, just like an everyday, like, oh, so how's this and that, it means the world. So yeah, I think for that reason is why I think college tutors, university tutors, academic tutors would benefit from knowing who in the class is estranged or care leaver, care experience, because then they don't have to ask them, how are you and are you coping, but you know, how's the work? So you weren't here last week, yeah, you're struggling, like, is there anything you want to like ask me? Just opening that door, really, isn't it, to having that support. I think, yeah, the rest, I think, that I can attribute to me, I guess, getting better and overcoming the loneliness and depression was more my engagement with mental health services. I think, yeah, reaching out myself, joining a society. The societies are great. The SU is really good for that as well. So, yeah.
It sounds like quite a few factors there is sort of what enabled you to sort of achieve all that you have. You know, you mentioned that kind of social circle, moving accommodation to find one that was sort of better for you. And just to slip in for anyone watching this or watching the recording as well, care experience in estranged students can apply for 365 days a year accommodation. There's further details on the student support website about that. Yeah, having people casually check in with you, not necessarily like a massive thing, but people just being like, oh, you're right, Lauren, how you doing? That kind of thing, just showing that they care, really. And just before I move on to Charlie, I'm interested in both of your perspectives on this. You mentioned, Lauren, it's really helpful when lecturers sort of know that your care experience or estranged. I think one of the issues, and we sort of see in the Widening participation team, is sometimes students don't tell us that information. If there's anyone watching this who's thinking of coming to uni and is like, I really don't know whether I'm going to say anything, should I, shouldn't I, what would your perspective on that be, both of you?
I think, so I hope you don't mind, I'll
Go
be quick.
for it.
Like I'm rambling.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I think personally, I would want to say, please tell the university, please tell you. I know there's that fear of, are they going to treat me differently? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to, that sympathy, that over sympathy that's going to be there? But it's really not like that. I think at least tell the student support team, at least, because that, even if you say, you can say to them, you don't have to tell the tutors. So I think I had emergency support from the support team, student support team, and said, do you want us to tell your tutors? They always ask, like, can we let them know this is why you've not been in, or this is why you have been in? And even then I would say, yes, tell them to tell the tutors, because then they're understanding, because then the last thing you want is going into the lesson and be like, well, you've not been here for the past 2 weeks, you've missed this now, you know, you're really behind, you really need to catch up, because they're thinking, oh, you're just dossing off because you can't bother coming in, because, you know, and I've definitely had a couple of lectures where I have been like that, and I've just thought, oh, I can't go in today, I don't want to go in today. But you don't want that on top of how you're already feeling, because the only thing you're going to get out of it is support. The only thing you're going to get out of it is, you know, there's going to be no judgment. And if anything, times where my tutors have been informed why I haven't been in, they haven't then approached me being like, are you okay, or made it uncomfortable, or been like overly, you know, like having too much sympathy. They've generally just been, I've noticed that I laid off my back, or they've not mentioned, I've been like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't do this, like, yeah, no, it's okay, they'd move on. And it's like, you know, if they didn't know that, maybe they would have been more like, okay, well, why didn't you? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, do it. But I also understand that there's that feeling of the stigma, the shame. You're going to be seen and treated differently. So it is a difficult one. It is your decision to make, but I would highly suggest you do it. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Lauren. Charlie, same question to you. If someone's watching this like, I really don't know whether to say something, what's your take on that?
So I personally, I've always had quite bad anxiety that I didn't realise was anxiety until sort of I saw a doctor up in Scotland, actually. So sort of for years I kind of just coped, and that was just sort of how I was. And that tends to mean that I will take on too much and do too much and throw myself into things, and that's not very healthy, because that sort of leads in burnout at the end of the day. So sort of picking up on what Lauren said before, the tutors that kind of like, you know, you've worked really hard this week, you know you can have time off, and like, so it's almost like permission. Sometimes you need sort of permission to have, you know, a little bit of downtime, or maybe not somebody asking if you're okay, but just, you know, do you understand this bit, or, you know, how did you feel about the class, or that can be really helpful. Because I know certainly if someone asked me if I was okay, I'd be like, yeah, I'm fine, and nothing was fine. But yeah, so like I said before, the counselling aspect of it I don't find would be particularly helpful for me, but knowing that it was there was definitely good. It was something that I kept in mind. And I think if anyone is wondering about what to do, like, you are under no obligation to tell anyone any aspect of your life if you don't want to, but similarly you can't get support if people don't know. So you don't necessarily have to tell every tutor, you don't have to go and find a counsellor, but find one that you have a rapport with, or somebody you feel that you can speak with. And even if I've found quite useful in recent years is saying, no, I don't want solutions, I just want to talk. So sometimes you feel like you go to somebody and they're immediately going, oh, you could do this, you could do that, and that's really not helpful, but just getting it off your chest is what you need. So you can lay those boundaries and specify that, but I think bottling it up, in my experience, doesn't do anything to fix the situation. So absolutely say something to whoever you feel comfortable saying it to.
Yeah, thank you both so much. I'm sure that'll be much more powerful coming from you guys with your lived experiences than just us in WP saying, oh, if you feel comfortable, please say something. This means that we can offer you more support. And I suppose it's kind of that distinction, isn't it, between school and college and university. When you come to university, you have to advocate for yourself a lot more. I think sometimes there might be that misconception that the uni will automatically know you are care experienced and share that. But actually, as you were saying, Charlie, we need your permission to share that. We need to be told that. So yeah, I would certainly back you both in what you were saying in terms of obviously we want you to be comfortable, but if you sort of let the university know, that means you're entitled to all of that support that we were talking about as well. Okay, excellent. Moving to a slightly different sort of topic of questions now is just I'm interested to hear what were some of the positives that you have felt has sort of come out from being at university and doing your further education courses that both of you have done. We maybe start with you, Charlie, for this one.
Yeah, so well, benefits of being at Edge Hill, or like what
can be Edge Hill, yeah. Sorry, so yeah, just positives of coming to university generally. It could also be specifically to Edge Hill, and positives from going on to do your path that you chose, so further education. Now you're a social historian, so what's been the benefits of doing those things and moving that way in your career?
Daily I will look around and think what a ridiculously incredible life that I have, that I've kind of built, that is all mine. I work with incredibly talented people, the artists, musicians, doctors, all over the place. Just there's such like a varied kind of social circle that I have in my life, and a lot of that stems back from being at university as well. So I made friends with so many people who I never normally would have come into contact with, and I've made fantastic friendships. I don't really have, well, I don't have any family in the UK at all. All my family's abroad, and that's just sort of distant cousins. So my sort of friends have become my family. So I've got, little army of godchildren now that are all sort of friends of children of my friends that I made at university. So that kind of social network has definitely expanded. My confidence has gone through the roof compared to what I was at high school as well. I was always the kid that if you had to read aloud in class, I didn't want to look at the teacher. Don't make eye contact, they won't see you if you don't move. And now I stand up and give lectures. And that never would have happened without sort of university experience. So I would do it again 100 times. So.
Oh, that is so lovely to hear, that you just look at your life and you're like, wow, this is mine. Like I did this, and it sounds like such a cool job as well. It's amazing. How about yourself, Lauren? I suppose what have you felt are the positives of being at university? You went on to do further study. What's been the sort of benefits to come out of that experience?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say, Charlie, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to top that. And I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. The jump, and brilliant, honestly, very inspiring. Yeah, I guess for myself, I think confidence as well. See, I've always been extroverted, but it was never in, and I see it sometimes with some of the young people I work with in 4 years and stuff. I do a placement at one, and at a community centre, and they have this like extrovertism, this confidence, and this really like outspoken, really kind of witty, and you're like, wow, this is really confident, like well put together person, but really it's all a facade. And I've always had that, and I think I rode off that a lot in high school and college, and then coming to university, and it's what's got me here. But it's learning, it's my internal, how I actually feel about myself. I always felt like I was confident and I could do everything, and I'm fed with that. Like close to burnout, sometimes I take on a lot, and it's almost to like try and feel like I'm worth something. But now I'm so much more, I'm doing this because I'm enjoying it. I'm doing this because this is what I want to do in my life. I've always wanted to achieve great things. I've always wanted to support other people. So going in the direction that I want it to, and touch wood, it continues to go in the direction. I've not got this. I do wish I had a bigger circle of friends and social circle. I think that's something I still need to work on. I was quite envious hearing, envious hearing Charlie talk about her huge social circle of friends. But I think it's a decision I've made. I think after being for so many years so outspoken and extroverted and wanting to be friends with everyone, I'm now thinking I want a few friends and I want them to really be there for me. And it's just a direction that I've gone, and it's how it's helped me to focus on myself more and realize, because I'd make the wrong kind of friends and they wouldn't be very supportive. And I think it's learning what kind of people I want to have around me. And yeah, a lot of what I've learned is more to do with like my inner self and like inner how I feel about myself. It's changed massively. And some days I wake up and I'm like, I wake up and I'm genuinely happy, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought I was going to be mentally unwell forever. I thought I was always going to amount to nothing. I thought I was going to do something I hated for the rest of my life. Yeah, definitely. I think partly on the course, learning about psychology and mental health and going on placements and volunteering and working at the care home that I'm at now, and just meeting people and genuinely meeting people, not just, it's removing that mask and doing what feels right for me and going in an organic direction. And because there's been so many opportunities at Edge Hill, opportunities that I didn't think I'd ever have access to before I came here. It's basically just giving me like whatever I want and you can decide. And at first it was overwhelming, I didn't know what to do with it, but then I soon learned like, okay, what can I actually do with this? And started like, exploring all these opportunities and like directions I can go in. And it's been really life-changing. I think that's very intense, but yeah, there it is.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear as well. And, this is why it's so valuable having you guys on the panel, because, I think you can measure success in all kinds of ways. It's not about how much money you earn or whatever, but the fact that you kind of both did what you wanted to do, that's success, isn't it? You both kind of moved on to things that you were interested in. And, Lauren, you spoke about learning lots about yourself, and Charlie, all the friends that you met, like all of this has come out of all these things that you've been doing at university and beyond. So that's just really, really inspiring to hear. I feel inspired. So thank you for sharing that. And obviously as well, it's so great to have your experiences, but there'd be, I'm sure, if we had another 10 people on the panel, they'd say different things too. We might have new things coming out. So it's wonderful to hear your experiences. And I wonder what other people would say as well about their sort of success from being at university, going into further study, and then moving on to careers as well. And I'm just curious, I think, Lauren, you did mention this earlier, potentially about part-time jobs, but I just wanted to bring the conversation to things like work experience and part-time jobs. Was that something that's been part of your journey to get to where you are now? What was that like, particularly as a care experience and estranged student, if that's relevant? So Charlie, did you have any work experience or part-time jobs during your journey at all?
So I before I moved up to Lancashire, I worked for the prison service for a year or two after my A-level fiasco, and then I moved up and did sort of a series of baseline admin jobs that I absolutely hated. Not because there was anything wrong with the job particularly, I just didn't find it, what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I got quite depressed with that. So I was quite I was beside myself when I got onto the access course at Edge Hill. That was like really what I wanted to do. And then from then, obviously couldn't work for a little while, and then got a part-time job with the NHS. So I was working at the Royal Preston Hospital for a couple of days a week, just sort of typing, and that kind of went from there. So I worked my way up through the NHS for a little while and left that in July last year. So my part-time job sort of turned into my full-time job for quite some time. But yeah, it was quite easy to sort of balance that with study when the tutors you were working with knew that you had other commitments and other work as well. Probably would have been quite difficult to balance everything had people not been quite so understanding, but that was definitely very good for me.
Yeah, and that nicely ties into what we were saying earlier, that idea of lecturers and seminar teachers being able to be lenient and understanding, knowing that you've got this part-time job alongside supporting yourself. Again, going back to that idea you brought up earlier of not having the bank of mum and dad, so that's really great. You were able to have that work experience, and how inspirational as well that work experience you had turned into this job that you love. So I think that's really testament to those watching or those watching the recording, that actually work experience can be super valuable. So that's great to hear. How about yourself, Lauren? Work experience, part-time jobs, what was that like for you?
I didn't work in first year, second year. First year, just I knew that I wasn't going to work. I had, fortunately, you do get the highest student loan by being parentally estranged, and I had the additional care leaver bursary. So that was more money I'd ever had in my life. I couldn't. I felt awful, but I couldn't empathise with my friends saying, "Oh, I'm so scared. I'm to really push." I'm like, I've never had this much money before in my life. I was really well off. I'm quite jealous now, actually, looking back. Second year, again, because of lockdown COVID, there was no real expenditure, and there was no work. I think I tried to get work. It was during the NHS, working for the NHS on I think it was the telephones, calling people who were at home, stuck at home. I think it was especially older adults, maybe, I think over 65s maybe, or I think people in general. And I couldn't because my provisional address did not match, I think I don't know, my current address, which was at the university. And I tried to explain to them, like, no, I live at university because I'm a student. I can't change my address to the university because I'm going to be moving out soon. Like, it's not, I can't afford to pay. And even at that point, I wouldn't have got a provisional license with the address on in time. So I wasn't allowed to do that work, unfortunately, which obviously safeguarding, I completely understand, but that was a bit unfortunate. And then third year, I worked a little bit in a cafe, which was part-time. I did a bit of placement work and volunteering work throughout third year, and a little bit towards the end of second year as well at Volder Hay Hospital and with Wigan Council and mentoring. I really enjoyed it. The placement I especially enjoyed. Financially, it was a little bit of a strain because I'm travelling more, but it was manageable. Finding the work again, I think I definitely went to careers to try and get support applying to these places and going for them. I think it's this year that I've been struggling more doing the masters because I'm paying all my tuition fees, which is still discounted heavily, as well as paying for my driving lessons, which is like £300 every month or so, and then of course paying for rent and the cost of living, everything going up in price. My weekly shopping has almost doubled. It's quite difficult, and I'm working basically full time at a care home, and it's 12-hour shifts, so it's very intense. And I'm kind of juggling a lot. The main issue I've had is that there's stigma from others, and I don't think it's intentional, and I don't even know if I'd go as far to call it stigma, but it's like oh, should you be doing that, or maybe don't do that, or it's quite a lot that you're taking on. And it's come from my college tutor in particular, and it was a little bit disheartening because I think I'm doing really well. Like, I know that if I'm going to burn out, I know to take time off work, I know how to look after myself, and I completely understand it comes from a place of care and understand, just wanting the best for me and like the best for myself on this course. But it can feel a little bit disheartening and a little bit frustrating, because then when I've explained to them, which is in contrast to Charlie's testament to her tutors, I've told them that I'm working a lot. I've got these that I'm doing, this voluntary role that means I'm going to be going to London every month or so, and then the student governor role. I said I'm going to be quite busy, but it's like, and I just wanted to let you know that if I am like ever absent, or if I'm like a little bit behind, I will catch up and stuff. And it was more of like I don't know if you should be doing all that, and it's a little bit frustrating. I'm like, well, I really want to do this, and I'm enjoying doing it, but I just appreciate that you'd understand that it just means, like, if I'm working and I'm putting all this energy into these different things, obviously my grades aren't going to be as high as I would like them to be, but I'm going to be happy with them, and it's going to be enough. And alongside everything else, I'm satisfied with I think of like I'm creating a life for myself. I'm happy with what I'm creating, what I'm working on. I just kind of wish I had more support with that, because it's my decision and I'm standing by it. Yeah.
Can I jump in with something? So I had pretty much the same experience as that with my degree up in Edinburgh. So obviously I had to take a year out of full-time work because it was a very intense course. And I went to the one of the tutors on the first sort of day and said, I have to work part-time. This is my business. I have to feed myself. What days am I not expected in university? And they just went, you can't work. But I have to work. And they went, no, you can't work. It's too intense for you to work. And I thought, well, realistically, how do you think I'm going to survive the next year then? So what would happen is I spend 5 days a week in university, full days, study through the night, and then work all weekend. So I did almost kill myself in that year just through sort of having absolutely no downtime whatsoever. It was really, really hard, but there was no understanding from the staff here at that point. It was just, you have to work. You have to be here. You can't work. But that wasn't the experience that I had with the tutors at Edgehill. They were much more sort of understanding that life does sort of go on outside of the university walls. But I think, again, that falls down to the backgrounds of the kind of students they're sort of usually looking at a lot of the time. And if you don't understand somebody's background, that's not helpful. So yeah, it's a case of sort of communicate. It's frustrating when you try and communicate it and it falls on dead ears, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that was a nice waffle for you. There you go.
No, not at all, Lauren. You look like you want to say something. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I chip in with something else as well?
Go for it.
A second. I'll let you go. I'll let you go first.
I love it.
I was going to say it completely does fall down to the tutor. So I've got one personal tutor, one tutor in my course who is really, really understanding. There's some who just aren't at all, and I think it's their background as well, and the way they describe some of the the time that they think that we have is like, sit down with a book and a glass of wine, and take the weekend to just read this, and during reading week, I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I'm packed. Like, I'm going to have like a day of downtime, but I'm not studying in that one day. I'm going to have a day for studying, a day for downtime, a day for this. And I think it's down to maybe the individual as well. Like, I think maybe their personal, how they think that you should operate and should do X, Y, Z. And I think the course I'm on, they have this idea that we're all really, I don't know. I think it is down to their perception of other people and themselves and how you think they should live your lives. I think the fact that I'm working alongside this course that I'm doing, I think is outrageous to a lot of them. But yeah, having that extra support. And so I know that the careers are doing a part-time work awards, and we speak to my friends about this because we saw the shadow minister for education, and we mentioned this, like Cambridge, and I'm assuming Edinburgh is the same policy. You're not allowed to work alongside your courses. You can get in trouble for it because it's just so against what they stand for. Because I mean, realistically, you don't want to be working alongside a degree. You want all your energy to go in your degree. You want the best marks possible to learn the most from it, of course, but that's not real life. And I think bridging that gap between people who maybe from working class or like parentally estranged, care leaders, etc., is understanding that more financial support is needed. And if they are working alongside it, which they may very well have to, is how can you help get them back up to the level of those who aren't working and have more free time? Because I mean, I don't have the answer personally. I wish I did, but I think that's something that I'm personally passionate about looking into. I think I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, sorry, but yeah, what was you going to say, Charlie?
No, it was just on the back of a point you made about the increased student loan for being estranged that I'd completely forgotten about. So I didn't qualify for that in my first year because my estrangement happened literally as sort of my degree kicked off. So that was, the first year was all calculated off of my parents' income. My second year, I couldn't have got her to sign the paperwork even if I wanted to. So I had to prove estrangement. And I don't know if it's the same now, but you had to prove you'd earned over a certain amount for 3 years before you qualify as estranged. Is that still how it works?
I don't know what the latest is, to be honest. That's definitely something that I can look into.
They asked for a letter from an official to prove that you are estranged kind of care. So I had to get
so I had to give wage slips and prove that I'd earned over, I think it was £9,000 or £10,000 for 3 years prior, to prove that I was entitled. And I remember them arguing with over £5. They said I'd earned £5 too little in 1 year, and I didn't qualify. And it took months to get that worked out to sort of get the right amount of money. But that was really difficult. And I think at that point, because I'd not had great support from sort of financial services, I didn't sort of go and seek help at that point. But that might be something quite helpful to students who are sort of struggling to sort of offer maybe like extra sort of financial advice or extra help. With the student loans company are a nightmare to go through, especially when you're a kid and you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, that would have been really helpful to me at that time, but I'd completely forgotten about that.
And I mean, I'm so glad that this question was asked now, because it sounds like this sort of financial area is just so integral to kind of life. I don't wish to generalize, but from the experiences of yourselves in the context of this call, so integral to actually your university experience. And like you say, Lauren, in an ideal world, you don't work alongside your degree and you're able to kind of put all your energies into it. But actually that finance being a huge factor as someone who's care experienced or estranged and things like that. And I think as well, picking up again on a point that I know Lauren and I we've talked about before, but you've touched on again today, all those extra expenses like driving to your placement or needing to buy uniform or whatever it is. And I think statistically speaking, generalizing, care experience in estranged students tend to go into professions that are like social care orientated or health, like wanting to help people. And quite often that is things like being a social worker. You need a car for that. Who's gonna pay for the driving lessons, right? Well, you know, I'll work before I graduate to make sure that pot of money is there. I know, Lauren, that's something you've kind of chatted with me about before. So it's all those hidden costs alongside, you know, your shopping, like you say, Lauren. You know, the cost of living has doubled and that kind of thing. And again, it will vary between different universities. But again, if you're watching this as someone who is thinking about coming to uni and has anxieties around finances and that kind of thing, have a look at what that university offers, whether it's Edge Hill or not. Have a look at what do they offer you. There's a bursary here. Lots of other universities do that sort of bursary. Look at what you'd be entitled to. At Edge Hill, we're really fortunate to have a money advice team and things like that. So whether you're considering Edge Hill or somewhere else, worth looking at that support to see, you know, where am I going to kind of get the best support alongside what I'm doing. Okay.
We've got a fantastic book bursary, I have to say, as well. We got a really good book bursary, and if we couldn't get sort of copies of books, the library would always get them in as well. So sort of read, like a really lengthy reading list shouldn't be, you know, don't look at that and think, oh, it's £500 worth of books. Like the library will help. You just have to go. So.
Yeah. Fab. And I think as well, it comes again, we've gone full circle, which is great. That idea of kind of you know, advocating for yourself, you know, saying I need this book, I'm not able to purchase it, you know, what can you do to help me, because the help is here, and it's kind of utilizing that, or through, for example, our student advisory panels, where there is a gap, where there is something missing that the uni isn't doing, that needs to change. It's not just okay that we accept, oh, that's just the way it is, you know. So it's again why things like this are so useful. I've learned loads from you guys about where gaps are and where things are missing and that sort of thing. Okay, just to kind of check in on where we're at with time, I'd say we've probably got just under 10 minutes of us talking before I hand back to Georgina, so just keep you posted on that sort of thing. Just thinking of the best questions to ask that we've got with the time that's left. I'll go for this one. Lauren, in particular, you've spoken about this idea of stigma and shame being a part of your experience, sadly. Do you think that stigma exists still towards care experience and estranged students? And if so, what are like ways, people in this call, myself included, what can we do to help dismantle that if you still think it's prevalent?
I think it is a little bit, not as much as it used to be, especially with new like widening access participation, like policy and action plans that come into place. I think probably over the past like years, it's a bit more of a hot topic now, I guess, as well. I guess there is a stigma, and probably less so in academics, maybe more of like the stigma I think in place is that it's not assuming that all care leavers are bad per se or parentally estranged because of some kind of trauma that is leaving. I think I said that one of the stigmas is that we're perceived as bad or naughty, or we're going to make bad decisions, or, you know, without the lack of parental guidance and support, we're going to go completely off the rails and prone to struggling with like mental health disorders and, you know, like problem children, quote unquote, which is really, really unfortunate. And I don't think that's exactly how people view people in care. I think everyone knows, like, logically, like, this is not what the average person in care looks like, or somebody's parentally estranged. That's just like a really extreme stereotype. I guess it's addressing it. And if you see it's just being open-minded and being person-centered, isn't it? And holistic when you're meeting a person. Like, there's that need. And I'll meet people who are like parentally estranged or care leavers as well, and I'll still have it in my mind, like, I've got this perception that you're going to be like this and you're like this, and you've got this need to reaffirm it. So when they mention something and it ticks that, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that's because of their experience. Although there might be a lot of similarities that cross over, like the negative stereotypes where, you know, they are struggling with mental health and such, or maybe they've got traumas or, you know, past experience with going down the darker path, but now they're not. And if they're trying to better themselves at university, they definitely don't want to be going down that darker path. I think most people I've met from like care homes or who are parentally estranged or in foyers, they really, really, really want to achieve. They really want to be seen. They really want to be validated, or feel validated, should I say. and that's definitely there. So even if maybe they are struggling or not engaging or withdrawing, maybe that shame and the fear of the stigma is holding them back, and fear of being judged, and then you kind of play into that character. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm worried people are going to assume that I'm no good and there's no point, and there's no one's going to think I'm an amount to anything anyway, and you kind of fulfill that, being like, there's no point trying. Don't let them do that. And if you're someone who maybe does that as well, then I guess it's okay to do that every now and then. But if you catch yourself doing it and you have a minute to just stop and like question it, just keep doing this for you. It's so easy to fall back into that, and some days you will, and it's not an overnight process or thing that happens. But if you are struggling with and I'm speaking of myself here, these kind of qualities where maybe characteristics like struggling with mental health and maybe wanting to go down a dark path and this like self-destructive behaviors, it shouldn't be a stigma, but I think it's turned into a stigma when really it should be seen as something that isn't something to be ashamed of, but something to do with your experience, and you should be supported through that, and something you should be proud of going through. Or if you're still going through it, be proud of it, because it's not easy, and you're still going. So yeah, it's a strength, not shouldn't be a stigma.
Yeah, I love that, like flip the narrative, like actually because of my experiences, like I'm really resilient, like I've achieved all this, and it's not trying to put rose tinted glasses on or anything like that, but just going, it's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be, like you say, to be proud of. And I think sometimes, I think, Lauren, this is an idea to credit to you. You mentioned to me before about, when we talk about statistics around care experienced and estranged people at uni, it's often this percentage of people drop out, this percentage, blah, 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 blah. What about actually, people like yourselves who we're celebrating today go on to do amazing things and have those successes, yes, in terms of your career, but also all of those wonderful transferable skills that you spoke about. And just before I move on to Charlie for your response as well, I just saw in the chat a really good point from Claire, which I'm very grateful that you mentioned, was just going back to the finance thing, the student support fund at Edge Hill as well, kind of having money set aside for students who want to embark on projects, and kind of having university funding, and also scholarships as well, and that kind of thing. But yeah, sorry, side note, Charlie, back to yourself in terms of do you think stigma is still an issue, and if so, what can we do to help in sort of dismantling those social constructs?
So I think from my perspective, the stigma was much worse when I was younger, and it was, again, what I said before, sort of, you've only got one mum, stop being silly, you've had an argument, and that isn't the case. And I think that it's very important to not make assumptions about somebody and about their circumstances. Like, you can't assume, she doesn't talk to such and such a relative, they must have had a tiff. That might not be what happened. You don't know, you can't assume things, and I think the problems come when people do assume things as well. One of the most helpful things that I've seen recently was actually on TikTok, of all places, which is slightly addictive, is TikTok. But yeah, somebody said, someone around my age said that being involved in an adult child's life is a privilege, not a right. And that helped me really sort of reframe my sort of experience. I think, I'm not holding a grudge. I'm not, being silly, as a lot of people might say. It's the result of somebody else's behaviour that I've decided isn't acceptable. So that has been really helpful. So, thinking about, what best serves you and your mental health, and don't make assumptions about somebody else. If they want to tell you about their experience, they will. If not, then treat them at face value, how you would want to be treated. I think that's the only real thing that I can say. If you don't know about somebody, you can only go off of what they show you.
Yeah, and a quote from a college that I used to work at that really stuck with me, sort of lines with what you're saying there, Charlie. It's this idea, like, if this is someone's life, well, we can't see all my little blanket out screen, if that's someone's life, that is probably what you know about it. Mm-hmm. So always to kind of be mindful of those wider experiences, not making assumptions about what people do or don't have. Excellent. I think
there's a big thing with hypothetical questions as well. What if this happened? Is like, well, that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So it's not. Let's not do this.
Yeah.
But that is quite prevalent. What if this happened? What if that happened? What if I was born on Mars? Like, these things aren't realities. They're not helpful for people to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think in the final 5 minutes, if it's okay with you guys, what could be great to do is 2 more things before I wrap up and then Georgina wraps up. The first being, if you could give just one sort of takeaway piece of advice to someone who is watching this, is care experience and estranged, you know, thinking about university or thinking about careers, what would that be? And then after both of you have shared your perspective on that, just opening the floor for anything else that you guys are dying to say. And I've not asked a question that has facilitated that. So if we start with the sort of top tip piece of advice, maybe with Charlie, we were just talking with you. So
again, this is just how I've sort of done things through my life, but follow your nose. And if you really want to do something that interests you, just do it. Don't worry about, it could lead to this career or that career. If you haven't got a set career in mind, but you want to study, just go and study. Just go and do it. And there are definitely supports in place to help you through that, if you want to do that. But I think life is very short, and we should take advantage of every opportunity that we are given. And even if it just makes you happy for a couple of years being at university, do it. Just throw yourself in.
That's so lovely to hear. Thank you, Charlie. And how about you, Lauren? What would be your top tip, your best piece of advice for people watching?
I'm going to follow on from what Charlie said. Like, definitely do it. If you're thinking about something you're not sure, you're like, oh, maybe I should, or I don't know if I should bother, or anything like that, just do it. If you've got this gut feeling, or if you've got like an idea that it might go right, just do it and don't give up. If you have to miss a lecture, if you have to stop hanging out with friends, if you have to cut this person up, if you have to cut this off, if you have to spend the whole day lay in bed on TikTok because it is very addictive. Every tool you can, and put yourself first. Don't worry about other people. Don't worry about what they're judging you. It's your life. Like Charlie said, it's short. It's sorry, I sound like a threat. We've got one life. It's not as long as you'd like it to be. So just do everything you can, and please don't give up. Please don't give up. Keep going.
That's so powerful, especially coming from yourselves with your lived experiences. Thank you so much. And finally, before I do my wrapping up part, is there just anything else you just want to say? You feel like this is the platform to say anything. If not, that's absolutely fine. But just for me to shut up once more and let you guys speak, is there anything else you wanted to add? Do you feel your points have been covered?
It's been fairly comprehensive, I think.
Excellent.
I think man would just be proud of who you are. Like I said, with the flipping the narrative, don't let anything that you've been through be seen as a weakness or feel like it's a weakness, because it's not. You're likely very resilient, very adaptable, and very strong. So it doesn't matter how clever you are, what you look like, what you've been through, you deserve to be at university and do whatever it is that you're hoping to do. So
that makes me slightly emotional, Lauren. Thank you for saying that. That's so wonderful. So just to kind of say a genuine thank you both so much for giving up your time and being so honest and so vulnerable in your experiences. Like, I'm sure this has meant the world to some people watching or people who are going to watch the recording later. So I'm really, really grateful to you for doing this emotion work and kind of sharing all of this and giving your perspective. I can't thank you enough. And particularly, this is my first time hosting a panel as well. So what a joy to have you two on it as well. Just to follow on from some of the things that you've said. So as Georgina said at the start, this week is This is Home at Edge Hill. So this panel is part of that week, as is the exhibition that Georgina was talking about at the start. But there's other things coming up this week. So if you go to Edge Hill, This is Home in Google, it will show you the rest of the events. So there's a talk happening a little bit later in the week for staff and students, a little bit more on what is care experience, what is estrangement, practical ways to support young people going through that. There's also socials for people at uni at Edge Hill who are care experience and estranged, maybe want to meet up with other people. We've got a charity called Propel who do a lot of work with care experience and estranged people coming in, again, specifically for our care experience and estranged community. Even if you have had absolutely no involvement with anything like that in the past, you don't work for a panel, you've never met the Widening participation team, anything like that, I can't stress enough how welcome you are. It doesn't matter. We would just absolutely love to have you there. So feel free to come along if you would like to. I think that's everything from me. So I'm going to turn my camera and mic off now. But thank you both so much. And back to you, Georgina.
Thanks, Hannah. And you can rest now. But yeah, thank you so much for hosting this panel and letting us be a part of the This Is Home Week as well. And of course, huge thank you to you guys as well, Charlie and Lauren, for sharing your stories today. I know it's been said, but it really has been really inspiring to hear what you shared, and I am really grateful with how open you've been with it. And I feel like I've learned so much, and I feel like anybody who watches this or has watched it with us is also going to have learn things from it or take inspiration from it, and that's what we aim to do, really. There's already so much positive feedback in the chat that's come through, just saying that it's been a really insightful session, it's been really inspiring, really good. So have a read through that if you want to feel even better than you both look like you feel now. I hope you do anyway. I hope it's been a good experience for you guys as well, having that opportunity to share, because I know we've all really appreciated it as well. And you've had some really good advice throughout the whole thing as well, from kind of personal life advice, believing in yourself, and the advice on kind of engaging with support services that are available while you're in university, and it's just been really insightful, the discussions around both of your really unique journeys. So I will hijack again for my own kind of thing here and just talk about careers a little bit, and what the careers team can offer. So we're here to support students and graduates. We'll support you for up to 3 years after you graduate, and that's in all things career related. We are based in Catalyst at Edge Hill on campus, and my role as an employment advisor is I kind of give initial advice on topics like CV writing and kind of searching for roles. So that might be your part-time roles while you're in university, or looking at the graduate roles and starting to think about career plans. But I also have an additional role within my role, and that's to deliver an enhanced levels of support to the university's widening participation groups, helping to break down barriers when it comes to careers, and kind of giving you a dedicated point of contact. So, I think that's quite useful so that, you don't have to keep telling your story over and over again. You can have an appointment with myself, which is called a get ahead appointment. So if anybody who is a current student or a graduate from up to 3 years would like a get ahead appointment with myself, you can book that through the careers portal, and that will kind of look at anything that you might need in terms of kind of looking at CV writing, or perhaps looking for graduate roles and making applications and things like that. Just gives you a chance to have that little bit of an enhanced level of support there. And I deliver the panels as part of my role, and I think it's one of the great parts of the role as well, because you get to hear these inspiring stories and share them with all the current students, graduates, community, staff, everyone that watches these events and joins in on these events always has really great feedback, and we're still getting even more positive, lovely comments coming through. So that's really great, just saying how it's been such an inspiring thing to watch, and that just being really proud of both of you guys as well, how far you guys have come. So it's really great. And, I just want to say thank you again to you two, Charlie and Lauren, for joining us today, sharing your stories, and taking that time out to be involved in the panel. And again, for the openness and honesty. It's been so great to have the opportunity to hear your stories, and you can tell from what people are saying in the chat that it has been a really great opportunity for everybody else. And with the video going on to YouTube as well, there'll be so many more people that will get something out of that as well. I'm going to be sending out a link to that YouTube recording once I've put that up. And I'll be popping in some extra information, so kind of the information on the support services that you guys have mentioned, that Hannah's mentioned, that have been mentioned in the chat. I'll send them all out to people who have attended, so that they are readily available. But that's all for me, really. So unless Lauren and Charlie, you want to say anything else, we will wrap it up for now. Again, just really big thank you to Lauren and Charlie for being on our panel, and for Hannah for hosting the panel. It's been great. Everyone's been involved. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
It was really nice to meet you, Lauren.
I think I had too much coffee today, guys. I'm really sorry. I'm Claire. I think I've hogged the chat. But thank you so much. I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, I feel passionate about this anyway. And I think I might have helped you, Lauren, a little bit in a couple of years ago when you were applying for your masters. And I remember you have a great middle name.
Misha.
Yes, my friend is called Shamila, married to Michael, and called her daughter Misha. So that's how I remember.
Wow. Oh my God, brilliant.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.